In 2001, a momentous encounter took place at a major awards ceremony that would forever change the lives of two of the world's greatest performers, Beyoncé and Michael Jackson. The event was a spectacle in itself, drawing some of the most talented musicians and performers of the time, all gathered in one place to celebrate their achievements in the music industry. Beyoncé was still making a name for herself with Destiny's Child, the group that had already achieved significant success. With their powerful vocals, fierce performances, and growing fan base, Destiny's Child was clearly on the rise. Beyoncé, in particular, had begun to gain attention for her extraordinary stage presence. She was known not only for her powerful voice but also for her incredible choreography. Her movements were energetic, precise, and athletic. Her performances looked as if she had mastered the art of blending vocal power with complex dance routines. At the time, Michael Jackson was already a legend. His career spanned decades, and he had established himself as the king of pop. His music, videos, and performances were revolutionary, setting the standard for what it meant to be a global superstar. His moonwalk, his incredible vocal range, and his groundbreaking music videos like Thriller and Smooth Criminal had captivated the world. He was a pioneer of modern pop music and had set an almost unreachable standard for artists to follow. He had done it all. He had created performances that were not just concerts but full-blown productions, blending music, storytelling, and dance into art. The anticipation surrounding this awards show was unlike any other. For Beyoncé, it was a chance to see Michael Jackson up close, someone she had admired since childhood. She had watched his videos over and over again, trying to learn from his every move. To her, Michael was not just an entertainer, he was an artist. It was a dream come true that she would even share a space with him, let alone perform in the same ceremony. Backstage, before the ceremony began, both artists were preparing for their moments on stage. Beyoncé, in her dressing room, was going over her choreography for her upcoming performance. She was known for her precision and stamina, often pushing herself to new limits in her dance routines. As she practiced, she was fully aware of how much pressure was on her. She knew that this event would be a chance to prove herself as a solo artist after Destiny's Child had already achieved success. The spotlight was on her, and she wanted to deliver the performance of a lifetime. Michael Jackson, meanwhile, was in another part of the venue, preparing for his own performance. Unlike the other stars, who were often surrounded by a team of assistants, dancers, and stylists, Michael was known to be more reclusive and private in his pre-performance moments. He often preferred to work on his routines alone, focusing deeply on the details. His legendary ability to transform into his stage persona was something he took very seriously. He would spend hours rehearsing his moves, making sure every detail was perfect, from his iconic spins to his carefully calculated expressions. At some point during the day, the two came into close proximity backstage. Beyoncé, who had always dreamed of meeting Michael, was both excited and nervous. Her admiration for him was clear, and she had always thought of him as the ultimate example of what it meant to be an artist. She had been practicing her moves for her performance, hoping to impress the audience. But now, she had to focus on keeping her composure in the presence of her idol. As Beyoncé rehearsed, Michael happened to observe her from a distance. He watched as she flawlessly executed her choreography, spinning and jumping with precision, her energy matching the beat of the music. But to his critical eye, there was something missing. While her movements were indeed impressive, they lacked the depth and artistry that he felt a true performance should have. After a few moments, he approached her with calmness but a hint of authority in his voice. "Beyoncé," he said, his tone measured but firm, "what you perform is gymnastics." Beyoncé, taken aback by the sudden comment, stopped mid-step. Her heart raced as she tried to process what he had just said. She had heard that Michael was known for his high standards, but to hear him say this directly to her was a shock. She had always considered herself more than just a dancer. She saw herself as someone who infused her performances with a deep emotional connection. But Michael, in his own subtle way, was suggesting that her focus on athleticism and physicality was not enough to define her as an artist. Michael wasn't finished. He continued, his voice steady but powerful. What I create is art. Beyoncé stood there in silence, trying to absorb the gravity of his words. In that moment, she felt as if everything she had worked for had been called into question. Was she really just performing gymnastics? Was her dance and movement only about precision and athleticism, rather than expression and artistry? Michael's words hit hard. As a young artist, Beyoncé had spent years honing her craft, pushing her body to new limits to create stunning, visual performances. She had always believed that her rigorous rehearsals and complex choreography were what set her apart from others. But now, in front of the one person she had always looked up to, she wondered if she had been missing something. After the encounter, Beyoncé retreated to her dressing room. She needed time to think. She reflected on the harshness of Michael's words, but also on the truth behind them. Michael was, after all, the king of pop, a man whose performances transcended entertainment. His concerts were experiences, not just shows. They told stories. They engaged emotions. He didn't just dance, he made people feel something. Beyoncé knew that Michael Jackson's criticism wasn't personal, it was a challenge. He wasn't telling her to stop dancing, he was telling her to elevate her art. He was urging her to look beyond the physicality and think about the deeper emotional connection she could create with her audience. Michael was asking her to redefine what it meant to be an artist, to transform her performances into something more than just entertainment. For days, Beyoncé couldn't shake the memory of that conversation. She replayed his words in her mind over and over again. At first, it felt like a blow to her confidence, but gradually, something shifted inside her. She realized that in order to truly evolve as an artist, she needed to go beyond the physical moves. She needed to tell a story, make an emotional impact, and connect with her audience on a deeper level. Though the encounter had been difficult, it had also been a turning point for Beyoncé. She had been given an invaluable lesson by the very person who had once inspired her. Michael Jackson had challenged her to step up her game, to move from being just a talented performer to becoming a true artist. And while the initial sting of his words remained, they had sparked something within her that would drive her for years to come. After the encounter with Michael Jackson, Beyoncé couldn't shake the sting of his words. What you perform is gymnastics. What I create is art. His critique echoed in her mind, bouncing around her thoughts, long after she had walked away from him that day. She had always prided herself on her hard work, her dedication to mastering the physicality of dance, and her ability to deliver powerful, high-energy performances. She had built her career on being a dynamic performer, known for her precise choreography and her athleticism. But now, for the first time, she questioned if she had been focused on the wrong thing all along. For the next several days, Beyoncé found herself caught in a whirlwind of reflection. At first, she felt hurt. Michael Jackson was the king of pop, a figure she had looked up to for years. His words felt like a challenge, a judgment on everything she had worked for up until that point. She had spent countless hours practicing her dance routines, ensuring each move was sharp, each step was perfectly timed, each jump was flawless. But now, she realized, Michael wasn't just talking about technique. He was talking about something deeper. It wasn't about executing moves with precision, it was about infusing those moves with meaning, emotion, and artistry. He wasn't telling her to stop dancing or performing at a high level. He was telling her to elevate what she was doing, to take her craft to a level that transcended the physical. Beyoncé, though stunned by the criticism, began to see the wisdom in his words. Michael Jackson had always been more than just a performer. He was an artist, in the truest sense of the word. His shows were not simply concerts, they were experiences. Every movement, every note, every gesture was part of a larger narrative. He didn't just entertain his audience. He took them on a journey. When he danced, it wasn't about impressing people with his technical skills. It was about connecting with them on a deeper emotional level. His performances were like living art, unfolding in real time, and leaving his audience breathless. He made people feel something that went beyond the music itself. And Beyoncé began to realize that this was what she needed to do, create something that wasn't just about movement or sound, but about emotion, about storytelling, about transformation. The more she thought about it, the more she recognized that she had been limiting herself. She had been focusing so much on perfecting her moves that she hadn't considered the broader context of what she was trying to express. Was she telling a story? Was she engaging with her audience on a deeper level, or was she just performing for the sake of performing? This realization hit her like a wave, and for the first time, she understood what Michael had meant by his words. Beyoncé didn't want to be just another performer who impressed with choreography. She wanted to be an artist, someone who created experiences that resonated with people long after the performance was over. But this wasn't going to be an easy transformation. It would require a shift in how she approached every aspect of her craft. In the following weeks, Beyoncé dove deeper into her work. She began working with her choreographers to rethink her dance routines. She no longer wanted them to just showcase her physical ability. She wanted them to tell a story. Every movement had to have meaning. Every beat had to have purpose. She started to experiment with different styles of dance, drawing inspiration from a variety of art forms. She began to see dance as more than just a series of steps. It was a way to communicate emotions, to express herself in ways that words alone could not capture. Her music also started to evolve. She began to focus more on creating songs that weren't just catchy but meaningful. Her lyrics became more introspective, more vulnerable. She wanted her music to resonate with people, to make them feel something profound. She understood now that an artist's job wasn't just to entertain, it was to make people think, to challenge them, to move them. She wanted to create something that would leave a lasting impact on her audience, just as Michael had done throughout his career. The change wasn't immediate, of course. Beyoncé didn't wake up the next day and suddenly become the artist she wanted to be. It took time, effort, and a lot of hard work. But slowly, she began to transform. Her performances became more layered, more intricate. The choreography wasn't just about showing off her skills. It was about telling a story. She began to connect with her audience in a way she hadn't before. When she sang, it wasn't just about hitting the right notes, it was about pouring her heart into every word, about making the audience feel the emotion behind the song. At the same time, Beyoncé began to appreciate the importance of her stage presence. She understood now that being an artist meant owning the stage, commanding attention without needing to rely on flashy moves or stunts. It was about creating an atmosphere that captured the audience's attention and held it. Whether she was standing still, delivering an emotionally charged ballad, or dancing with all her might, she wanted to make sure that every moment of her performance felt authentic. She didn't just want to entertain people. She wanted to inspire them, to make them think, to connect with them in a way that felt real. This change in her approach didn't go unnoticed. Beyoncé's next performance at a major event showed the world just how far she had come. Her stage presence was magnetic. She commanded the attention of everyone in the room not just with her incredible vocals and sharp choreography, but with her ability to tell a story through her movement and expression. It was clear to the audience that something had shifted within her. She was no longer just a dancer, she was an artist. Someone who understood the power of music, of performance, and of connection. The feedback she received was overwhelmingly positive. People began to recognize the depth of her artistry. She had not only taken her dance to a new level, but she had transformed herself into a true artist. Her performances were no longer just impressive displays of athleticism. They were emotional experiences that stayed with people long after the show was over. But even as Beyoncé began to find success in her new approach, she never forgot the lesson she had learned from Michael. His words had challenged her, pushed her to think beyond the surface, and inspired her to become something more. She had come to understand that being an artist was about more than just mastering technique. It was about creating something that resonated with people on a deeper, emotional level. Beyoncé would continue to evolve as an artist, always striving to push herself further, to tell more meaningful stories through her music and performance. And as her career flourished, she would always remember the moment in 2001 when Michael Jackson's words had sparked a change in her, a change that would shape her into one of the most influential and respected artists of her generation. In the end, Beyoncé had learned that true artistry isn't about perfection. It's about the ability to connect with others, to move them, and to create something that has meaning. And it was this understanding that would define her legacy for years to come. After Michael Jackson's powerful words, Beyoncé spent a significant amount of time in deep thought. The sting of his critique had slowly started to fade, but the impact it had on her was undeniable. In fact, his words had set in motion a chain of events that would profoundly shape the next chapter of her career. Though initially hurt by what seemed like a harsh criticism, she slowly realized the importance of what he had said. It wasn't just a critique, it was a challenge. Michael Jackson wasn't saying that she wasn't good enough, but rather that there was an opportunity for her to elevate her artistry, to go beyond what she had already accomplished. Over the next few days, Beyoncé found herself reflecting on her own journey. She had worked so hard to perfect her craft, spending countless hours rehearsing her dance routines and vocal techniques. But until that moment with Michael, she had always focused on the technical aspects of performance, how sharp her movements were, how perfectly she could execute complicated choreography. She had prided herself on being a powerhouse performer, someone who could keep the audience on their feet with her energy and precision. But Michael had made her realize that there was more to being an artist than just showcasing physical ability. Beyoncé had grown up watching Michael Jackson. She had admired his ability to connect with people through his music, his dance, and his presence. His performances were legendary, not because of how well he could dance, but because of the emotions he could evoke in his audience. When he danced, it wasn't just about movement, it was about storytelling. His performances were filled with meaning, and every gesture conveyed something deep and powerful. It was this level of artistry that Beyoncé began to strive for. She didn't want to just impress people with her moves. She wanted to make them feel something, to communicate through her art in a way that went beyond the surface. At first, the idea of rethinking her approach to performing was a bit overwhelming. After all, Beyoncé had spent so many years working on the physical side of her performances. Her choreography was complicated and athletic, and her stage presence was undeniable. How could she possibly take things to a new level without losing what had made her so successful in the first place? This was the question that plagued her as she continued to reflect on Michael's words. However, as time passed, she began to see that Michael hadn't meant to discourage her. Instead, he had opened her eyes to a new way of thinking about her craft. He had given her a glimpse into the world of artistry, a world where dance and music weren't just about perfection, but about expression. The physicality of dance was important, but it was equally important to communicate emotions through those movements. Beyoncé realized that she could still be an incredible performer, while also infusing her performances with deeper meaning. In the weeks that followed, Beyoncé began to experiment with her approach. She worked closely with her choreographers, pushing herself to try new things. She no longer just wanted to learn steps and routines. She wanted to create something that told a story. Every movement had to have purpose. Every song had to evoke an emotion. Beyoncé started to see dance not as a series of complicated moves, but as a way to express herself. She began to use her body as a tool for storytelling, making sure that every performance was not only about showcasing her talent, but also about conveying a deeper message. This shift in her approach wasn't easy. She had to confront her own insecurities and fears. She had spent so much time honing her skills that it was difficult to break free from the idea that her value as a performer was tied to how well she could execute a routine. But with each passing day, she started to embrace this new way of thinking. She began to see the power of vulnerability in her performances. Instead of focusing solely on the moves, she allowed herself to feel the music, to immerse herself in the emotions behind the lyrics. It was a freeing experience. Beyoncé's music began to reflect this change as well. Her lyrics grew more personal and introspective. She began to explore themes that were more meaningful to her relationships, self-discovery, and inner strength. She no longer felt the need to focus solely on catchy hooks and radio hits. She wanted to create music that resonated with her on a deeper level, music that could connect with her audience in a meaningful way. Every song she wrote became a part of her own personal journey. And as she began to open up in her lyrics, she started to notice how much more connected she felt to her music. It was as if the walls she had built around herself for so many years had finally come down. As Beyoncé's approach to performance and music evolved, so did her connection to her fans. They could feel the difference in her energy. Her performances weren't just about entertaining, they were about making an emotional impact. Her voice became more expressive, her movements more fluid, and her storytelling more powerful. Her audience could see that she wasn't just singing or dancing, she was living her truth. And they responded to that authenticity. People were no longer just watching a performance, they were experiencing something profound. But the changes weren't just visible to her audience. They were also noticeable to the people she worked with. Beyoncé's team, from her choreographers to her band members, could see the transformation in her approach. They watched as she poured herself into her work in a way they hadn't seen before. Her rehearsals became less about perfection and more about creating something beautiful, something meaningful. She was no longer just focused on getting every move right. She was focused on making every move count. As she continued to evolve, Beyoncé began to receive even more recognition for her growth as an artist. Critics and fans alike began to notice the shift in her performances. She wasn't just a dancer anymore, she was an artist, someone who used her platform to express herself and connect with the world around her. Her shows became more than just concerts, they were immersive experiences that left her audience thinking long after the final song had ended. The impact of Michael's words was becoming clear. His critique, though harsh at the time, had pushed Beyoncé to rethink everything she knew about performance and artistry. She realized that being an artist wasn't about meeting expectations, it was about pushing boundaries, challenging yourself, and continuously evolving. It was about creating something that resonated with others on a deep level, something that could inspire, challenge, and move people. Looking back on that moment in 2001, Beyoncé felt grateful for the challenge that Michael had presented to her. His words had given her the drive to step out of her comfort zone and become the artist she had always dreamed of being. She wasn't just a performer, she was a creator, someone who had the power to shape how others felt, how they saw the world, and how they understood themselves. As she continued to build her career, Beyoncé never forgot the lesson Michael Jackson had taught her. His words had sparked something inside her, and that spark had turned into a blazing fire of creativity and expression. She had become more than just a singer or dancer, she had become an artist who understood that the true power of performance was in its ability to connect with the heart and soul of an audience. It was a lesson that would define her for the rest of her career, and one that would continue to inspire her for years to come. As time passed, Beyoncé began to notice a change within herself. It was subtle at first, an evolving mindset, a shift in her approach to her art. But soon, it became clear that she was transforming in ways she hadn't anticipated. The challenge Michael Jackson had posed to her wasn't something she could easily forget. His words had triggered something deep inside of her, and now, as she continued to rehearse, record, and perform, she felt a different kind of energy coursing through her. For the first time, She was truly embracing the idea that performance wasn't just about impressing the audience with intricate moves or high-energy choreography. It was about telling a story, creating an emotional connection, and leaving the audience with something to reflect on long after the performance ended. And while Beyoncé had always considered herself an entertainer, now she realized she could be so much more. She could be an artist. She could make her work meaningful in ways that transcended the stage. This transformation wasn't easy. It wasn't something that could be accomplished overnight. There were days when Beyoncé doubted herself, when the weight of change felt too much to bear. After all, she had built her career on her physical prowess, her athleticism, and her ability to perform jaw-dropping choreography. To let go of that and focus more on emotional expression, on creating art that moved beyond technique, was a risk. What if her audience didn't understand it? What if they missed the flashy moves and high-energy performances they had come to love? The thought of disappointing her fans was one of her greatest fears. But despite the uncertainty, Beyoncé knew deep down that she was on the right path. She couldn't ignore the fire inside of her. She couldn't ignore the urge to grow, to push herself further, to become something greater than she already was. She began working with her team, rethinking her approach to both her performances and her music. She started to dive deeper into the meaning behind her songs, allowing herself to be more vulnerable in her lyrics and more introspective in her choices. It wasn't just about the choreography anymore. It was about creating a performance that told a story from start to finish, drawing the audience into a world that she, the artist, created. She focused on the emotions behind the songs, what they meant to her, what she wanted to convey to her listeners. Her songs became more personal, more vulnerable, as she explored themes of love, self-discovery, pain, and strength. Through her music, she began to express things she hadn't felt comfortable sharing before, tapping into emotions that had always been there but had never fully been given a voice. Her lyrics became a reflection of her inner journey, the struggles and triumphs that made her who she was. Each song was a piece of her story, a chapter in a book that was still being written. In a way, her music became her diary, a way for her to share her personal experiences with the world. And as she embraced this new level of vulnerability, she found that her audience responded. They no longer just listened to her music, they felt it. They connected with her on a deeper level because they could hear the raw emotion in her voice, see the honesty in her performance. Beyoncé's new approach to her music was mirrored in her performances as well. Her dance routines began to reflect the stories she was telling in her songs. She worked closely with her choreographers to create movements that weren't just about looking perfect, they were about expressing emotion. Each step, each turn, each jump had purpose. She wanted to move her audience not just with her precision, but with the feeling behind every move. The difference in her performances was immediate. When Beyoncé took the stage, it was no longer just about how well she danced or how flawless her vocals were. It was about the energy she radiated. She had learned how to channel her emotions, her vulnerability, and her artistry into each performance. The connection she had with her audience grew stronger. It wasn't just about her impressing them. It was about her sharing something real with them, inviting them into her world. And that made all the difference. Her evolution didn't go unnoticed. Fans, critics, and fellow artists began to take notice of the changes in Beyoncé's music and performances. They saw that she wasn't just performing for the sake of entertainment, she was creating art. Her music was no longer just catchy, it was meaningful. Her performances were no longer just technically perfect, they were emotionally powerful. And her audience responded to that power. They felt the depth of her artistry, and they connected with it in a way they hadn't before. Even within her own team, there was a sense of excitement. The people who had worked with her from the beginning began to see the shift in her. Her rehearsals became more focused on creativity and expression rather than precision. There was a renewed sense of passion in every meeting. Every rehearsal, every song she wrote. Beyoncé had always been dedicated to her craft. But now her work had a new sense of purpose. She wasn't just performing because it was her job. She was performing because it was her calling. As Beyoncé continued to grow as an artist, she began to experiment even more with her music. She pushed boundaries, tried new sounds, and worked with other musicians who challenged her to think outside the box. She was no longer afraid to take risks. She had learned to trust herself, to trust her instincts, and to trust that her audience would grow with her. The music she created was more diverse, more complex, and more layered than ever before. But perhaps the biggest change of all was in her relationship with her audience. Beyoncé had always been known for her incredible stage presence. But now, she was known for something deeper: her authenticity. Her fans no longer just looked up to her because she was a talented singer and dancer. They admired her because she was real. They saw her growth, they saw her struggle, and they saw her triumph. And through it all, she remained true to herself. Her fans began to see a different side of her, one that was more vulnerable, more open, more connected to them. Beyoncé had become someone they could relate to, someone whose struggles and triumphs mirrored their own. She had built a bond with her audience that was based on more than just music. It was based on shared experiences and emotions. And that connection became the foundation of her success moving forward. As Beyoncé's career flourished, she continued to challenge herself. She pushed the boundaries of what it meant to be an artist, never settling for the status quo. She understood now that being an artist wasn't about perfection. It was about expression. It was about creating something real. Something that could move people. Something that could change the way they saw the world. And through her music, her performances, and her artistry, she did just that. She didn't just entertain, she inspired. And in doing so, she became one of the most influential artists of her generation. Looking back on that moment with Michael Jackson in 2001, Beyoncé knew that his words had been the catalyst for everything that came after. They had challenged her to rethink her approach to her craft, to see herself not just as a performer, but as an artist. And in embracing that challenge, she had unlocked a new level of creativity and expression that would define her career for years to come. As the years passed, Beyoncé's career continued to evolve in ways that no one, not even herself, could have predicted back in 2001. The moment she had shared with Michael Jackson, when he challenged her approach to performing, had been the turning point. His words had struck a nerve, pushing her to look at her craft in a completely different light. That challenge had set her on a journey of self-discovery, growth, and artistic expression that would reshape her entire career. The shift in her approach became evident not just in her music, but in every aspect of her public persona. From the very beginning, Beyoncé had always been known for her impeccable vocal ability, sharp dance routines, and strong stage presence. These traits made her a household name. But over time, as she embraced the challenge Michael had given her, she began to see the difference between being a performer and being an artist. She began to understand that the power of her music lay not just in its sound, but in its ability to tell stories, evoke emotions, and speak to the hearts of those who listened. She wasn't just singing songs anymore, she was creating art. As she continued to grow, Beyoncé took risks that many artists of her caliber wouldn't dare to take. She wasn't afraid to experiment with new genres of music, to blend different styles, or to explore unfamiliar sounds. Her albums became more than just collections of songs, they were works of art that captured the complexities of her emotions and her experiences. Whether it was the introspective themes of Lemonade, or the celebration of love and empowerment in Homecoming, Beyoncé poured herself into her music in a way that had a deeper purpose. She wanted to create something that would move people, challenge them, and make them think. She wanted her music to feel real, raw, and authentic, and the world began to take notice. Critics, once skeptical, began to praise her for her ability to push boundaries and break new ground. They saw in her the same level of artistry that she had admired in Michael Jackson years before. She wasn't just a pop star anymore, she was an icon. An artist whose work had a profound impact on culture, music, and the way people saw themselves. Her influence spread far beyond the music industry, and she became a voice for social change, a champion for racial equality, and a symbol of strength for women everywhere. But it wasn't just her fans who saw the transformation. Her peers in the music industry began to recognize her as a force to be reckoned with. Beyoncé had gone from being the young girl who was intimidated by Michael Jackson's words to becoming one of the most respected and admired artists of her generation. She had earned her place in music history, not just as a performer, but as a visionary artist who had redefined what it meant to be a woman in the music industry. Her performances, once focused purely on choreography and showmanship, had evolved into powerful statements of self-expression. She began to weave her personal experiences into her music, creating songs that were deeply connected to her own life and struggles. With Lemonade, she shared her personal journey of love, pain, betrayal, and healing. It was an album that resonated with so many people because of its honesty. Beyoncé was no longer hiding behind the polished image that had once defined her. She was embracing her vulnerability, and, in doing so, she gave her fans the opportunity to connect with her on a deeper level. The emotional depth that she brought to her music was something that set her apart from other artists. She no longer felt the need to present herself as perfect. Instead, she allowed herself to be flawed, to be real, and to show the world that she was human, just like everyone else. This vulnerability became one of the most powerful aspects of her artistry. It was what made her performances so compelling and her music so relatable. People felt like they knew her, not just as an entertainer, but as a person. She had found her voice, and in doing so, she gave a voice to so many others. Her impact wasn't limited to just her music. Beyoncé used her platform to speak out on issues that were important to her. Whether it was advocating for Black Lives Matter, celebrating her heritage, or empowering women, she used her music and her influence to shine a light on the causes that mattered most. Her 2018 Coachella performance, which became known as Homecoming, was a cultural moment that celebrated Black culture and the power of Black women. It wasn't just a concert, it was a statement. It was her way of showing the world that she was proud of who she was and where she came from, and that she wasn't afraid to stand up for what she believed in. Through it all, she never forgot the lesson Michael Jackson had taught her. His challenge, his words, had pushed her to become the artist she was always meant to be. She had taken what he said to heart and had turned it into something beautiful. She had moved beyond the boundaries of performance and had created something that had a lasting impact on music, culture, and society. But the journey wasn't always easy. As she reached greater heights, Beyoncé faced her own set of struggles. The pressures of fame, the demands of her career, and the constant spotlight on her personal life could sometimes feel overwhelming. She was no longer just an artist, she was an icon, a symbol of strength, and a role model for millions. But with all of that came a constant scrutiny that left her questioning whether she was doing enough, if she was living up to the expectations that the world had placed on her. Yet, through every challenge, Beyoncé continued to rise. She continued to create, to innovate, and to inspire. In the process, she had learned how to balance her personal life with her career, to embrace the highs and lows, and to remain true to herself. She had become not only a powerhouse performer, but a mother, a wife, and a leader in the industry. She had mastered the art of staying grounded while reaching for the stars. Beyoncé's journey was one of constant growth, and it was a journey that would never truly end. She was always evolving, always looking for new ways to express herself, always striving to do better. She knew that the world had high expectations of her, but she also knew that the only thing she needed to do was stay true to herself. Her artistry, her voice, and her message would always be her legacy. Looking back on everything she had accomplished, Beyoncé could see how far she had come. From the young artist who was once nervous about meeting her idol Michael Jackson, to the global icon she had become, she had grown into something much more than she had ever dreamed possible. Her art, her music, and her performances were a testament to the power of self-expression and the importance of staying true to one's vision. As her career continued to flourish, Beyoncé knew that she had reached the pinnacle of success, not just because of her incredible talent or her record-breaking achievements, but because she had finally become the artist she had always aspired to be. And in doing so, she had created a lasting legacy that would inspire generations to come. Her story was far from over, but it had already been written in the hearts and minds of millions. And as Beyoncé looked toward the future, she knew that no matter what came next, she had already achieved the most important thing of all. She had become the artist she was always meant to be.